Thank you, everyone, for joining the Cal State DC Scholars inaugural Masterclass series, Leadership Challenges in a 21st Century America. Today, we are so excited to feature Congresswoman Young Kim, and she joins us to share her journey in becoming one of the first Korean American women elected to Congress in its 230-year history. She represents California's 39th district, and as an immigrant, small business owner, and previous California State 65th District Assemblywoman, we'll explore how she has pursued the American dream to become this successful leader and politician. So, Congresswoman, I would like to kick it off with a question about your leadership and your leadership style. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us about a person or two that have helped form the foundation of your approach to leadership?
Great. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Eliza, for having me here. And it's really exciting to be able to represent my 39th Congressional District, which many of you know, since you're attending Cal State Fullerton, you will know my district includes parts of Los Angeles, Orange, and San Bernardino counties. So thank you for having me. And it's really exciting to be able to talk to young leaders representing the great state of California in Washington, D.C. Before I answer your first question, Eliza, I want to let you know, for some of you who may not know this, I have 4 children. 3 of them have attended Cal State Fullerton. And so I am a very much Titan at heart, even though I'm a Trojan myself. So I just wanted to throw that out there and let you know Cal State Fullerton is in my district. Therefore, I have a special place for Cal State Fullerton in my heart. And also for me to be able to join you and have this dialogue, I want to thank a very long time dear friend of mine who is also one of your advisors and advocate of Cal State Fullerton, Mr. Owen Holmes. He's responsible for confirming my appearance here today. So even though I can't see you, Owen, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for making sure that I had the time to be able to have this dialogue with you. And Eliza, going back to your question, I think the question was, are there any people that I can mention that have helped me form the foundation for my approach to leadership and life? Well, I must say that on a personal level, my husband, Charles, has always fought for causes that he believed in. And he formed coalitions to help our community, such as the Korean American Coalition, KAC. He was one of the 3 founders in the early 80s. And I actually found out about it and became a volunteer when I met him in my early days attending USC. This is a nonprofit organization that engages Korean Americans in our community, advocating for their issues and focus on leadership development. Of course, my dear daughter, Kelly, she's my second daughter. Along the way, many of you may or may not know, she had 2 open brain surgeries when we found out early on when she was a young girl that she had brain tumor. But she loved to play sports. She's a very outgoing, she loves life. And through the very difficult process that we had to go through, she has shown resiliency. And so she's also a source of inspiration for me. But, quickly on a political level, my former boss, Congressman Ed Royce, is the one who taught me so much about serving the community. He taught me how we can get a lot of things done if we don't care who takes the credit. So he empowered me to take on the initiatives and work on issues that helped me to develop my own areas of expertise. And in fact, he's the one who encouraged me to run. I didn't realize that the more than 2 decades of working with him has been the training ground for me, and that it had prepared me for what I do today.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And I love how you were generous enough to give us a personal example, but also a professional example as well. Thank you for that. And I also want to know more, or we would like to know more about your leadership style. And you've mentioned in multiple interviews that you're running as your own person, your own record, and that you've proven to be an independent leader. But just elaborate on those statements, but more importantly, how you describe yourself as a leader, whether it was as now a member of Congress or perhaps a few years ago, and how that perhaps it evolved. But talk to us about that.
Sure. You're right. Whenever I was running, people thought, what kind of person is she going to be? What kind of legislator is Youngkin going to be? So let me talk to you quickly back to when I served in the state assembly. With my election to the assembly in 2014, that was the first time when we had flipped a Democrat seat to a Republican seat. So I helped to break the 2/3 supermajority held by the Democrats, but we were still in the minority. That meant that it was very difficult to get any of my policy priorities passed without the support of the Democrats. So I quickly learned early on how it is important to work across the aisle. So by doing that, and despite those challenges of being a member of the minority party, I was able to work on policies that brought tangible results to help the most vulnerable population in my district, like the seniors, the youth, veterans, homeless population. I did it by working across the aisle and securing a bipartisan support, and ultimately succeeding in getting $10 million for homeless veterans and another $10 million for homeless homeless youth population. You see, it's not about who, but how we get things done. And I'm most proud to have worked on a bill to freeze college tuition hikes while Prop 30 was in effect. And I know this was really big deal for college students like you.
So tell us more about that.
Exactly. We had Prop 30 that said for about 6 years, we will not increase tuitions in colleges. But before I was sworn in 2014, we saw the UC and Cal State Fullerton making an announcement that they're going to increase college tuitions 25%. That means 5% every year for the next 5 years. So I had to introduce that legislation. But with that kind of bipartisan spirit, I came to Congress to get through the gridlock and get some things done. So I represent people who voted for me, as well as those who did not. That is why I think it's important to work on issues and work with people on both sides of the aisle. So to keep that promise, I joined the Problem Solvers Caucus. In Congress, this is a caucus that has equal number of Republicans and Democrats, and we've already worked on several important issues, from taking a bipartisan trip to the southern border to see the crisis firsthand so we can work on bipartisan solutions. And I also am a part of the bipartisan infrastructure working group that recently released a common sense infrastructure proposal, and with President Biden wanting Congress to pass a infrastructure, which we recognize we need help in that area because we have crumbling roads and infrastructure, water structure. I mean, there are so many things that we need to work on, but we need to find a common sense solution that will be long lasting. So lastly, before we get to the next question, I'm really excited to tell you that in just less than 4 months into my first term, I've already had 3 of my bills passed out of the House, and 1 has already been signed into law. So all bipartisan bills to help small businesses, and I'm just getting started.
Well, actually, no, and thank you for mentioning that. I'll jump to, because I do want to talk about, and it's regarding the pandemic now, but specifically with small businesses. And in your district in particular, it is the heartbeat of the various communities across your district. I would say arguably across the nation. I mean, we're dealing with small business owners were hit the hardest in the nation during the pandemic. They're still suffering during this time, but 40,000 small businesses closing their doors, and nearly half of those closures are permanent. So please talk to us about, you already alluded to a small business bill that I believe you said already passed
Yes.
or it was introduced, but talk to us more about that and the other 2 as well. We definitely want to know.
Of
hit
course.
the ground running.
You know, before I went to Congress, you know, before I started my work in public office, I was a small business owner too, and so I understand the challenges faced by entrepreneurs. That's why I'm excited to be able to fight for small business owners and small business community as a member of the Small Business Committee. I also serve as a ranking member of the Small Business Subcommittee on Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Workforce Development. We're going to have our very first subcommittee-led hearing tomorrow, actually, talking about innovation, entrepreneurship, workforce development. So I'm excited to be able to work on pro-growth policies that support our entrepreneurs and allow for prosperous workforce. So as I mentioned, I already worked on a legislation that is already signed into law, that is the Paycheck Protection Program Extension Act. We already had about $88 billion at the time of me working on this introduction of the bill. And but you know, this Biden administration had made some changes to that application process. So people with still about $88 billion left in the PPP loans and small businesses not having had the opportunity to take advantage of it, I felt it was necessary to make sure that they had chance to get their fair share, to get their first draw or even second draw of the PPP funds that was going to expire on March 31. So my bill simply gave small businesses 2 more months through the end of May to apply for a loan so they can keep their doors open, keep employees on payroll, and allow the Small Business Administration 30 more days after that to process those loans. And so already these bills are going through the process. The other two that I'm talking to you about, I have the SBA has 504 loan program. These are the loans that are available for small manufacturers to have more access to capital. Small businesses, especially the startups, they need help, and getting access to capital is always a challenge. But this 504 loan program will, number one, increase the amount of loan they can have access to by up to $6.5 million. And it also streamlines the loan process. So it should be very helpful to you, and our 39th district and beyond have so many small businesses, especially in the manufacturing sector. So I'm hearing from so many businesses how this bill should be helpful for them, especially during the pandemic. And I've had a lot of roundtable discussions with the small businesses before I introduced this. So I know this is going to be very helpful to those communities and especially businesses that are looking for a little bit of help.
Well, thank you so much. Within, and just to give people some context, to do all this in just 4 months, and obviously you've had a long career in public service, so you've pulled from those experiences as well. But it's impressive and very exciting that you represent us, because again, you're certainly hitting the ground running.
Yes.
So I would like to, just so people know, and you already mentioned that you did work for Congressman Ed Royce,
Yes.
who he did step down a few years ago, but you worked for him for more than 2 decades.
Yes.
But could you talk to us about how being a staffer to Congressman Ed Royce prepared you to represent the same district? And tell us too the role that you had, because you did some prominent things during your time with Mr. Royce that I definitely want the audience to hear.
Sure. You know, so I worked for 21 years in his congressional office. Prior to that, I studied in his office in the state Senate. As I mentioned earlier, I never thought that working for Congressman Ed Royce and the experience I gained while working with him on so many different things would prepare me for one day I'll be serving in Congress. Because first of all, I was very happy and content in working with him and being able to provide the constituent services. Along the way, I was learning so much. And that was just, you know, content. Being who I am, raising 4 children, serving the community that I've, you know, raised my children in. I was really happy about it. But you know, he had given me so many opportunities to work on foreign affairs policies as a director of Asian affairs that allowed me to work closely with all very diverse Asian American community in my 39th district. And then there is a 1/3 Hispanic community, and then 1/3 Caucasian, very diverse. But my work with him allowed me as a Director of Asian Affairs and Community Relations Director, ability to create an APCAC, which is Asian Pacific Congressional Advisory Council. It allowed me to involve individuals from our very diverse district to serve as advisors and have input into the congressional process by giving us input on policy ideas. My job as a staffer was to put all of that together and present it as a potential legislative priority. And thankfully, Mr. Royce gave me so many opportunities to be able to run with it, run with initiatives. And many of those really help our very diverse district, working on North Korea human rights legislation to talk about the human rights in the rogue countries like North Korea, in China, and then talking about the Vietnam human rights legislation, from security to trade to everything in between. So working as a staff for Congressman Royce I believe, has really prepared me for what I'm doing today. And that's why I'm very, very excited to be able to serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Small Business Committee, as I mentioned, and also on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. So we have very robust aerospace engineering companies in the district. And as I am serving on the Space, Science, and Technology, I'm going around the district, visiting with businesses that are actually largest supplier and manufacturing firms that make the parts that actually go into the aerospace aircraft that we've recently seen, Perseverance rover that we launched in March early on, and actually being invited to go to JPL for the launch and actually seeing the landing of the Perseverance rover on Mars. It's just so exciting. So, I'm just putting all of that experience I gained from working with Ed Royce to now being able to serve you as a representative with all that experience. And of course, I just didn't realize how much there is more work to be done. So every day it's a learning experience for me.
Thank you for that thorough explanation, because I did want to make sure that we touched base on the 3 and 4, a freshman member in the U.S. House of Representatives to pick 3 committees. That is a lot, but there is no doubt that you can certainly handle all that work. But we want, and you've done an excellent job explaining why you picked each committee and what you how that's tied to the district. So I appreciate that already. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And we still have a few more questions to get to know you better. But I do just want to put it out now for the audience that are listening today with us. If you do have any questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A chat. So later towards the webinar, I may choose that question. And we also have some pre-submitted questions too, but just wanted to make that announcement now. So Congresswoman, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges? Because you've already mentioned a few priorities that you're focusing on, and you folded that into your the 3 committees that you have chosen to serve. But what do you think are some of the biggest challenges facing constituents in your district, especially during this tumultuous time?
Obviously getting us out of, a pandemic is probably one of the biggest priority and challenges that we are facing right now. And I know many of you are in college, and you are probably nervous about finding jobs during COVID-19 and networking and transitioning to the real world while things are still virtual. And, networking requires physically seeing each other, hugging each other, and, really having a one-on-one dialogue, not one person talking at a time like we're doing when we're on the Zoom, right? But, so I really hope that the challenges of us getting back to normal, whatever that normal means, is a priority for us. And people want lower healthcare costs. They want lower taxes, especially in California, where we've seen so many people and businesses leave our state from high cost of living, affordable housing. All of these are important. And because so many people left California, citing the fact that California is probably the most taxed, highly regulated state, they are having a hard time keeping their businesses open, they're leaving. Which is why we are losing one congressional seat. You probably heard that, with the recent news. So that is a challenge. How do we come up with the pro-business policies in order to not only retain businesses to stay here, but encourage people to come in to the state of California? So I'm constantly grappling with that idea, and hopefully these are some of the things that I continue to work on in all of the communities that I serve on. But I'm also a co-founder and co-chair of the bipartisan SALT caucus. Many of you will start paying your own taxes soon if you don't already. So this is why the SALT caucus is important, because in the 2017, there was a tax reform that capped state and local taxes up to $10,000. Unfortunately, this current cap is how much you can deduct from state and local taxes when filing your tax returns. But this hurts individuals and states with high state and local taxes like California. That's why I helped introduce the SALT Deductibility Act to repeal that cap. And I'm committed to doing my part to make life more affordable for all Californians. And the reason why we formed the SALT caucus is so that we can go around and convince my colleagues on both sides of the aisle how this $10,000 cap, SALT cap that is hurting us. And we need to tell more of those stories. And that's what our caucus is focused on doing.
Yes, SALT. Very important to California and a few other states across the nation. Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that and for giving us issues that you're also, aside from the pandemic, and that's first and foremost, but other issues that are important post-pandemic that you work on. If you could elaborate, though, staying on that topic, but for students, what you would like to, what you plan, or what you're already working on, or what you plan to work on and accomplish this Congress on issues that impact our students.
So beyond pandemic, I know there are the issues that I just mentioned. College students are worried about student forgiveness, right? For the student loans. So that is something that I'm currently working on. I don't have the details on how we can get there, but I think you all agree, you're not asking for free. You're all paying your tuition. And what we're talking about is potentially, working on student forgiveness. If you can demonstrate the needs and the fact that you've worked so hard, but you're having a hard time trying to pay back the student loans, then there is a way that we might be able to work on student forgiveness. But also being able to give more Pell Grants when you're in school, it will allow you to get the college education that you need without having to sit on mountain of debt when you come out. Because we want you to get the quality education that we can provide, especially we are boasting about great educational system like Cal State Fullerton. We want to provide you with the quality education, but we need to get you into workforce and start making money and start thinking about having a family. Isn't that what we are all striving for? So I will continue to work on that. But beyond pandemic, some of the priorities that I have in this Congress is obviously to help people get back to work and grow our economy back to where it was before the pandemic. And I want to make the government work for the people again. We've recently seen how many of my colleagues want to throw money at problems instead of working together to find solutions. Throwing more money at problems is not going to fix the problem. We need to find solutions. and find reasons why there is a fundamental problem that causes it. So that's what I'm focusing on, and that's what I'm trying to do this in a bipartisan way by talking to my colleagues on the other side. And I already learned that I think there is plenty of ways that we can find common ground to secure the border. First of all, we have to recognize there is a crisis on the border, but now that we recognize the crisis, how are we going to fix that? So we need to come up with a sensible immigration reform, fix our broken immigration system, and work with our allies. I'm talking about, Northern Triangle countries, like in addition to Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. We need to work with them to help promote American values on the world stage and provide much needed updates. Like when we are talking about immigration reform, we need to keep them in the conversation. And also talking about infrastructure. We have failing infrastructure needs. And first, for me, it's very important. What is infrastructure? Let's define that and then come up with the projects that needs funding, and then we can come up with the legislation that will be sensible for both Republicans and Democrats to agree on. So these are some of the few issues I look forward to adding my voice in the national conversation. But I also want to make sure that we make life more affordable for Californians. We've seen so many workers and businesses already. You mentioned in your question that in California, we have 40,000 businesses closing, and 20 of them have closed permanently. And so we need to really work on policies so that we can make California livable again and want people to come in to stay here. So and I mentioned, like I said, we just started working on repealing the cap on state and local taxes, the SALT deduction, and making housing more affordable. So I think it starts with maybe working on reducing the regulation. So those are some of the priorities that I have, and for the students as well as for American economy in general.
Congresswoman, you're on a roll, getting a lot of incoming excitement, compliments, just a lot of enthusiasm. Before I shift to another set of questions talking about, well, how you made history, if one question that just was submitted, but if you could elaborate, you mentioned it earlier, if you could elaborate on how you dealt with homeless veterans and homeless kids when you were in the state legislature, and also, two-part question, but also, do you think perhaps there's a solution that could be adopted nationwide?
Sure. So when I was first elected to the state assembly, one of the first things I did was have a roundtable discussion and brought all the stakeholders from the district to identify my legislative priorities. And one area was dealing with the homelessness issue. And we identified at the time that in my own district, there were like 30,000, probably more, homeless population. Among those, there were like 19,000 homeless youth population. It was very alarming to me, and it was very important for me to address that issue immediately, because I didn't want homeless youth to grow up. If we don't take care of the situation today, they're going to grow up to be chronically homeless adult population. So in talking to the legislative office in Sacramento and working closely with the stakeholders in Orange County, we've identified the areas where we can work together and provide a consortium of organizations. Instead of just saying, okay, one organization can take care of this, we found one areas where find the groups and come together and build a consortium. And what I will do is at the state level, look at the funding opportunity where all stakeholders can apply for it all at once. And so that's what we did. I initially had a legislation to ask for $25 million to provide the emergency shelter to take care of and house the age groups between 18 and 24. Why was that important? Because foster children or homeless youth, they fall out of the system when they become 18 because they become adult. And then when they are 24, they are considered adults. But this is the age group where we need to keep them in colleges to get the college education. So I wanted to provide a area where they can be like stay in a place for like at least 2 to 4 years at a time. And while they are there, they get the college or 2 year or 4 year college education, as well as getting some sort of a training, job, workforce training, so that when they are ready to enter the workforce, they are prepared for it. So that's what I introduced. But as I mentioned, I was a member of the minority party, and my initial bill did not get out of the committee of jurisdiction. But learning how to work through the process, I work with my leadership on the Republican side and the Democratic leadership, and said, you know what, there is a budget process, an appropriation process, and all the bills that require funding requires 2/3. And I said, I will be that 2/3 vote if you will include my priority and make sure that my priority is funded. That's how I was able to get $20 million for homeless veterans and homeless youth population.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And so I do want to make sure we get to you making history. I think it's very important to talk about and pick your brain about that. But talk to me about what it means to be one of the first Korean American women elected to Congress, and perhaps what you hope your election says about the future of the Republican Party, or just about Congress in general, what that means.
Sure. First of all, I have to tell you how honored and humbled I am to be one of the first Korean American women to serve in Congress. In this election cycle, not only myself, but my dear friend and sister, Michelle Steele, also from Orange County, was elected. So there are two of us serving as first Korean American Republican woman, and we're joined by Andy Kim of New Jersey and Marilyn Strickland, also from Washington State. So there are really, truly bipartisan Korean American caucus there, 2 Dems and 2 Reps. It really means a lot. And also our freshman class is by far the most diverse freshman class ever. And on our side, we have like at least 18 or 19 female Republican women elected from all different backgrounds. Some of them are veterans. Some of them are, like all, just like me, from minority communities. So it's really exciting to have that, a lot of diversity in our class. And I realized that there are many women and Asian Americans who came before me to allow someone like me to have a seat at the table and have my voice heard. And, I can talk about this later, but, people like, Senator Tim Scott, for example, is a great source of inspiration for me too. So I want to do my part to help young women and girls speak up and get involved in the political process, just like I did. That is not to say I'm discounting the gentlemen on the call who I don't see, but there are, my goal is to be a mentor for especially young women and girls. That's why I mentioned this so much, because it's very important for me. And the fact that I am one of the first Korean American Republican women to serve in Congress shows that the GOP is the grand opportunity party. It creates the pro-growth policies to get people back to work, grow our economy, lower taxes, protect our national security, and help Americans of all backgrounds achieve their American dream too. So this is beyond just one minority community. And as I say, Asian Americans are Americans, and Asian American issues are American issues.
Thank you. So let's go there. Let's get granular here. Could you talk about some of the barriers, if any, that you see for Asian Americans or people of color for that matter getting involved in politics now? And what advice, well, if you could answer that, because then I also want to know, or you can just go straight into it, what advice you would give those individuals if they are thinking about running for Congress one day, or just a public office.
Sure. First of all, the question about if there are any barriers that I see as Asian Americans. Sure, I think one of the first difficulty or challenges that there aren't very many of us. I only mentioned out of the 435 members of Congress, there was only 4 of us, but this is 4 more than 0 we had before Andy was elected in 2018. And then 2020, we followed him, and he's the lucky man, we always say, surrounded by 3 other Korean American women. So while this is a challenge, I think we see a lot of optimism. And I'm really hoping that through us serving as mentors, we will be able to get more of us get elected, and we can lift up more AAPI voices. And so I look forward to serving as mentors. And again, I keep mentioning the mentor-mentee relationship because it is so important, because through the mentorship program, I can continue to talk about my story. I know it's not unique. Most Americans or immigrants have the similar story, but the fact that I, as an immigrant, I, as a female, a woman, can serve in United States Congress. I hope my story can inspire others, and especially young women and girls, to step up and get involved. And someday we will see more of us serving together. You know, it could be 2 years later, it could be 10 years later, and Eliza or my daughter Kelly, you never know. One of you could be running for office and we will be colleagues. But, you know, for that matter, I do want to give you advice for individuals who are, particularly women, thinking of running for Congress someday, is that be confident. When the opportunity comes, go for it. Don't ever hide behind your gender and say, oh, I can only do so much. Oh, I only belong in kitchen. No, don't ever say that. 30-some years ago, it was my husband and my Michelle Steele's husband. Our husbands, whenever we have a family vacation together, it was the man talking about politics. It was Michelle and I always, in the kitchen, raising our kids together. And we had no idea that we would one day be serving in Congress, or let alone run for office and be elected. But now look what's happened. It's Michelle and I on the front lines in politics, and our husbands are following us and carrying our bags and taking pictures for us. You never know. So when the opportunity comes, go for it. And if there is a trail in front of you, or in front by somebody who has done it before, like me, like Michelle, follow that path. But leave your own trail along the way for others to follow, because someday when the others run for office too, you have been there, you made that trail, and we'll be serving together, and you're helping others come along the way. So you never know. You never know. Go for it.
Thank you for those very inspiring words. And somebody just in the Q&A chat, they would like to know, because you talk a lot about the mentor-mentee relationship, but if you don't mind disclosing, do you have a mentor in Congress, or perhaps somebody that has retired, maybe an Ed Royce, but if you can talk about the mentor-mentee relationship from your personal experience. Yeah,
of course. Obviously, Congressman Royce continues to be my friend, my mentor, and we talk on a regular basis. And as I mentioned early on, everything I know and everything that I do now, I think it's come from the experience and the lessons I learned while working with him. He always said, Young, be magnanimous. When you're trying to do the right thing, there are always people coming to you that would be criticizing you, but stand tall, be magnanimous. And he always said, if you don't care who takes the credit for, you can get a lot of things done. So he continues to be my source of inspiration and my mentor. But then there is a couple other people I'll quickly mention. Condoleezza Rice. While I was working with Ed Royce, because he was serving on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and when Condoleezza Rice was the Secretary of State, she was the National Security Advisor, being the first African-American woman to be in that position, it itself is a source of inspiration. But, she grew up in the early 1960s in Birmingham, Alabama, when the discrimination against African-Americans was so vivid. But her mother always told her, never give up. You may have to work twice as hard or 3 times as hard than anybody else, but if you work hard, study hard, you can be whoever you want to be. And look, she did go on to become the first National Security Advisor and first African American Secretary of State to serve in our country very notably. And then another person is Ambassador Nikki Haley, former governor of state of South Carolina. She went on to serve as the first female ambassador to the United Nations, and she served our country well with grit and grace. And she even has a book about it. And so, those two women continue to encourage me in what I do. So I'm very, very thankful to have them and call them my friends, as well as their mentors.
Well,
thank you for that question.
I'm very inspired. No, this is fabulous. I definitely appreciate all this inspiration. Very much needed, especially during times this interesting, challenging time right now. So I'm sure others that are listening in feel the same way. Thank you so much for being so candid as well. Another question, and we are starting to wrap up, so just a few more, but a question here from the audience. But what is your best advice for a Cal State DC student scholar so that they can make the most of their time when they're in DC doing the program?
First of all, in addition to working as an intern in any office or congressional offices or even any of the departments that you're assigned to, make the most of it. But make the most of the time outside of the work during your DC Scholars internship program. Explore Washington, DC. It's a place full of history, full of wonderful amenities. Right now you think that, oh my God, I'm doing this, I'm doing part of the classes, and oh gosh, I'm stuck 1 hour listening to young kid. But you know what? Take the opportunity to learn as much as you can. Build that relationship that could go a long way. You never know. Let me give you an example about my daughter who did the Washington, D.C. Scholars Program. The day I picked her up from the airport, upon her completion of that DC Scholar Program, I remember the conversation. She said, I don't know what's in store for me, but I love Washington, DC so much. I made so many connections, built a relationship. I'm going to go back as soon as I graduate from college. And I said, huh? You have a few more months left and we don't know what's there for you. And nobody has, provided you with any job offer. But she was so intent on making the most out of her relationship that she built and the experience that she had working at the Department of the Interior. And I think, Eliza, I think you worked with her, right, during your internship a year after my daughter did in 2011. And so these are the experience that is valuable. So explore as much as you can. To finish the story about my daughter, she did go back. She graduated. She immediately hopped on a plane, went to Washington, D.C., and she's still working at the Department of the Interior. So I'm telling you, if you find a passion through this internship, you don't have to go back to Washington, D.C. But, for those of you who may not go back, this is your chance, and explore Washington, D.C., explore the history and build relationship, because if you come back to California and find your profession in doing anything but politics, that will still go a long way, because anything that you do, it involves politics. If you're in a financial services area, you need us, those of us who work on the Financial Services Committee or Small Business Committee, to advance the policies that's important for your industry. If you're an engineer, if you're doing anything in medical field, legal field, you need elected officials to make that relationship. So make the most of it. Enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely. Make the most of it. Enjoy it. And I love how you mentioned your daughter, Kelly. And I find her personally very inspiring. And it makes sense given that, she learned a lot of that from you. So it's very nice to see all of this unfold during this webinar.
And I want to make sure there is a very strong Cal State Fullerton alumni, and I'm sure all of you are listening in. Many of you are alumni too, so they're offering their personal connections as well. And so use the alumni network to find the first job, or use the alumni network to get the letters of recommendation to the places that you want to land on. These are, wonderful. Hopefully it will help you. I'm putting all of you, especially the alumni members joining us on this webinar, but use their connection to get ahead. It's all about who you know too.
That's exactly right. And we're getting a lot of comments just saying how inspiring you are, how authentic you are, and a lot of that. I just want you to know we're so happy that you're able to join us. So my closing question before I give you the floor, just for some closing remarks, but you worked for Congressman Ed Royce. We've already established that for more than 2 decades, and the state assembly, and you've done all these other amazing things in your life that have gotten you to this point as a member of Congress. But so far, and it's only 4 months in, but were you surprised by anything?
What I was surprised was how, I always knew Congress is an institution that is supposed to be partisan, right? But I didn't realize how partisan it has become since I left the office of Congressman Royce. I left in 2013 to run for my state assembly race. So I haven't been back until I was elected. But then, I think there are many different factors that contribute to this, but it has become so partisan. And that's why I think people like me who are trying to find common ground and work across the aisle, joining Problem Solvers Caucus, I think there is more need for us to come together like this. And that is why when I mentioned the immigration reform infrastructure legislation that we're currently working on, these are the bipartisan proposals that the Problem Solvers Caucus is also proposed. And both leadership on the Democrat and Republican side are looking into it to see if there is a common ground. We also introduced and had a meeting with the Biden administration, and they know of our bipartisan infrastructure proposal. So hopefully we can find some things about, especially the physical part of the infrastructure bill, that really requires, the funding for the time being. We are looking for that common ground bipartisan solution in an era where we're living in a very partisan institution like United States Congress. But I'm telling you, I'm very optimistic that there is more things that we agree on. Therefore, as soon as we can get back to normal and meet in person, not just through the little box and through the Zoom, when we actually meet in person and have a dialogue, we can understand where each other is coming from. And so when I differ with you and we have a differing opinions, at least they understand where I'm from. The fact that I talk about my immigrant story, the fact that I talk about how as a mother of 4, raising 4 children, building a small business before I got into public office, these are the things that really unite us, because it's not a Republican or Democrat issue. Raising family, putting family values, and putting education first. These are the issues that unite us. And especially as women, we're talking about, childcare as a #1 priority for us, because it will allow working mothers to be able to know that my child will be taken care of while I'm, right next door doing the work. See, oftentimes these people think that, oh, that's just a Democratic issue, or oftentimes that's just a Republican issue. But I think that we can find some bipartisan common ground solutions in this, what I think at the moment is a partisan institution. So, and then on that note, I do want to say that since I worked in a private sector, I think it has really prepared me to work in a private sector, because as a small businesswoman, I actually, after college, I worked as a financial analyst. I was doing merger and acquisitions, which is now at Wells Fargo. And many of you listening in might be considering to do accounting or business administration or marketing. And so I just wanted to tell you, just build your own private sector experience before you enter public sector and run for office, because it will give you some areas of expertise and it will make you stand out as a policymaker. And it is really, private sector is a cutthroat business, always worrying about net profit, always worrying about making payroll, keeping the businesses open. And I was always working in a fast-paced, results-oriented environment. So now sometimes in government, we see how slow things work, slowly work. It's frustrating, but sometimes, that's what happens in government. And but I think my experience in the private sector taught me how to get things done quickly and collaborate with others. So I'm really honored to be able to have this opportunity to not only represent 39th District, but represent all of you. And so thank you for everyone. If you're in the age where you were able to vote, continue to vote for me and make sure that I go back as a sophomore so we can continue to do the great work for our America. This is a country that gave me so much opportunity. So I want to make sure that I work hard for the next generation. That includes you and your children and grandchildren. Thank you for having me.
It is our pleasure. Thank you for those closing remarks. And we are going to wrap it up here. I want to thank you again, Congresswoman, for joining us, for injecting such enthusiasm, inspiring words, your optimism. Yes, this was a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For everyone that's listening in, thank you so much for attending. I hope you enjoyed it. I sure did. And this will conclude our Spring Cal State DC Scholars inaugural Masterclass series. Congresswoman, thank you again.
Tk you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye for now.